Hi, Keith.
Good afternoon, Karie.
I really appreciate you sitting down with me today and having a conversation. And I really want to start by saying, Keith, I really want to talk about customer obsession.
Yeah, it's a great topic. Obsession is an interesting word. I
It's
mean, you hear about
a little
customer
creepy.
centric. It's creepy. They make movies about it, and it doesn't normally turn out well. But I think in this case, we're better than that. I think customers want companies to know who they are, and they want to allow companies to invest in making experiences that make their lives easier. I think that's the way you can be customer obsessed.
I agree. So let's start by talking let's really start by talking about what is the definition of customer obsession, right? What does that really mean?
Right.
And the way we really talk to our customers, our clients about it is that to become customer obsessed is that you really put the customer at the center and you really want to understand their needs, their wants, their expectations. And in a lot of ways, you want to understand what are all the things you make them do to engage with your business that they don't want to do. What are your thoughts on
Right.
that?
Well, no, it's a good definition. I mean, putting the customer at the center, or you can say, we think about the customer and we draw a line backwards. And really, it's what you said. What matters most to your customer? And you work to deliver that. And so it's as simple as that. And maybe it's more than just a couple of words that are saying, let's be customer obsessed. It's kind of a concept. It's actually a business principle. And a lot of organizations, I think a lot of leading organizations, sort of lead with that philosophy internally. And those are the ones that are creating experiences that light up the customer and people talk about. And they can have an audience or a segment gravitate towards their brand because they did something in their experience that aligned to the values of their customer. And it's a philosophy that takes a leap. You have to put the customer in front of maybe business objectives in some cases. But the reward is success on both fronts. And so I think being customer obsessed has benefits to organizations beyond monetary, for sure.
Agreed. And I think that what we're really seeing is that when organizations really choose to step back, right? I'm in commerce, right? I do commerce strategy. And we see a lot of organizations, manufacturers, distributors that have always done business a certain way, right? They've always managed their business that way. And their whole organization is structured around that. And when you start talking about being customer obsessed, it's even starting let's define the customer. Who is our customer? We have lots of different
Right.
customers, right? And every one of those customers has different needs and wants. It's not like it's a one size fits all, but it really is, I think, to your point, I love what you said about, it really becoming a culture within the organization about being customer obsessed is your goal is really to bring down the barriers that make it hard for customers to work with your business. When we talk about user experience as an example, it's not just the designs on your website, right? It's your entire organization, physical interaction, digital interaction, every interaction you have with a customer or partners of yours, whether it's a retailer or a distributor or a dealer, they're also representing you, right? Like every interaction matters and time matters. And that's what we're really talking about in my mind.
Right, right. There's a phrase that I like to use, which is the customer interest is the business interest. And it
Right.
really is kind of a lens. It's a bit of a filter for decision criteria. And a lot of organizations, I think a lot of organizations believe in sort of customer centric approaches. They believe in doing things that really can innovate and evolve their customer experience. I think all organizations believe that that's a priority. But when
Right.
it comes down to sort of being practical and pragmatic and actually taking the steps to truly engage with your customer, to understand their values and understand how you can sort of close those gaps, I think, in the first step in being a customer-centric organization is understanding your customer. I think with speed to market and everything that's happening so quickly today, often that gets either short-cycled or it gets sidestepped, and you use either hypothesis or you sort of it's not prioritized in the development of an experience, and it could be a commerce experience certainly, and so that might be just a little bit of a secret within the industry, is like, how do you get more companies to actually not just talk about
Right.
it, but actually do this? And you'll see organizations and the benefits that they get when they truly do exhibit those sort of customer obsessed behaviors within the organization.
Right.
For sure.
What are some
For
of the
sure.
benefits that you see, Keith?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think agility is important today for any company, really of any size. Certainly, when you think about being customer obsessed, you're constantly monitoring and talking with your customers. That's just it's in your DNA, which means you're more ready to adapt to the changing environments. Think about the last 2 years, the companies that were in that sort of framework where they had that agility, and their ability to move through COVID was probably, they did it with more success than companies that had to quickly ramp up. So I think agility is part of that. It's in the DNA. You get an issue from a client, you see a client issue, you don't celebrate it, but you say, hey, there's an opportunity to make something better.
Right.
Versus it's an issue we have in our customer experience. It might get deprioritized because we've got a roadmap for implementation for something else, and it just tends to create a little bit of a parking lot of customer experience ideas that don't quite get prioritized. So I think agility is a big one.
I think you're right, and I think some of the other things that we see is that I came from B2B, right? I spent a lot of my time in manufacturing and distribution organizations, and I can't tell you the number of times I heard people within our organizations, multiple organizations, not a single one, say, our distributors don't know what they're doing, right? They don't have any clue. And I really think about, what are we asking them to do that's really making it hard for them to do business with us today, right? Because in a lot of cases, organizations need those relationships, right? A lot of times that's the significant amount of their business, right? Is through those existing dealer retailer relationships. And it's interesting to me how many companies really think that they're doing a great job, and that the dealers or the distributors are just, they don't know what they're doing, they're failing, they don't get it. And when you really start getting engaged with both sides, what you find out is that there's big disconnects, right? And there's so much opportunity to improve those relationships and help enable those partners to be successful, which is a direct representation of your brand, right? So that's another opportunity. I always think, when you're talking about these things and you're talking about your existing go-to-market approach, do you want to enable or disrupt what you're doing, right? Because that's a big part of getting obsessed with your customer, is that if you want to enable, then there's probably a lot of opportunity to improve those relationships and improve that experience for the customers who are in the end going to be engaging with you one way or another.
Right. And we talk about understanding the customer. It's understanding their journey as well, their buying journey or their, especially in B2B, that a lot of times, our customers will have end customers. And in order to understand what's driving value for a B2B customer, some of those decisions are driven by the end customer. And so when you think about empathy with our buyer, understanding their journey, which isn't just within a sliver of, the buying experience, it's much broader than that. And so having that understanding and that awareness and being able to ensure that you are aligning to some of those values that are happening within their market or within their category, within your experience, I think is important, because today a lot of people, and this is in the B2B space for sure, they buy based on values. Is this organization aligned to the values that my organization has? And as that transparency is becoming more and more part of commerce, I think it's important that you're creating that environment within your commerce experience, so you can ensure that your audience and the values that you have, the values that they have, again, kind of getting back to that, the business interest, the customer interest is the business interest. Those are the types of things I think as being customer centric. You start thinking about aligning that versus, I know when you're inside an organization, it's about the product, it's about the attributes. You kind of tend to get very inwardly focused. And this is really about maybe getting outside, looking from the outside in.
And it's really interesting when you talk about that, right? Because so many B2B organizations, especially, are product obsessed, right? Instead of customer obsessed. And
I like that.
It's true. And the reality is it's so hard to differentiate products today, right? More and more products are becoming a level of a commodity, right? And everybody argues with me on that. But what I mean by that is you can go out and search on the internet for a product that used to be very unique that now you can find 10 other companies that sell that same product. Now, everybody has different features and functionality and uniqueness, but that's not the difference, because what people are looking for is, do I need all those bells and whistles and fancy things? So when we start talking about customer obsession, one of the things I find interesting is I hear all the time customers are willing to spend more money for a company that really provides a really good experience, right? Like, it's easy to work with them. They can get the answers they need. It's very clear, how the company functions, is organized, how their partners support them, right? And they feel that wherever they interact with that organization, they're really getting what they need. And then price doesn't become such an issue, right? And otherwise, commodities is a race to the bottom, right? I mean, it's just a race to the bottom. Yeah. And there's so many ways that you can really bypass that. So, Keith, we talked about a lot of really good things. So we want to make sure we're really hitting on how do you do this, right? So as organizations, okay, we need to be customer obsessed. We understand that we think we are, and maybe we're not as obsessed as we really want to be. We don't really understand our customer as well as we maybe we think we do, but let's take that risk and say, let's really find out how well we really know them. How do they start approaching this? Like, how do they get started? Because this is there's a lot to this, right?
Yeah, it can. I mean, you talk about boiling the ocean. I mean, it can get quite complex. But I think there's probably three primary ways to get started. And I think we've touched on a couple. I think understanding your customer, I think, is the first, and we've talked a little bit about that. But truly understanding your customer. The second is understanding the journey. It could be the journey within your industry, could be the journey within your buying, experience. And then the third would be potentially to identify opportunity. What are those friction points in the experience, or what are those opportunities where we see gaps that we think as an organization we can fulfill? And the first two are more observational. It's just sort of like, you're just observing. The third piece here is where you can really start to make a difference. And I think looking at that, being able to say, we see opportunity to innovate within our customer journey, within our commerce journey, for instance, to close some gaps, or to create and wrap a point of view around our product that appeals to our audience, appeals to our buyer in a way that our customers are doing that. And some of the benefits you get when you do that, again, nimbleness is one. Loyalty, you talked about it, and I think it was a great point. Customers will spend more with organizations that create a better customer experience. Right. Well, that's very transparent. Customers know that. And so you'll get loyalty when you do that because they want to participate. They might even help you improve your customer experience, and you see that quite often as well. So I think that third piece is important as an organization, knowing your customers, knowing their journey, and then being prepared to find opportunities and begin to develop. Again, maybe this is another topic, but start to develop and plan how to start to close those gaps as a company and start to initiate projects that would innovate your experience and really start to try to close that gap with your customers.
Well, when we start thinking about identifying your customers, I think this is an interesting topic, right? Because as we look at new opportunities to reach new customers, new segmentation, new opportunities, right? Like maybe we've traditionally been this B2B company. We've always gone through our channel. and that's the way we've always gone to business, gone to market. But now we look and say, there are slivers of markets that we're not even thinking about, right? Like maybe there's a consumer market that is completely outside of what you normally do, or something that's a new opportunity, and really understand, like, what is that opportunity? What is that market, right? What is that opportunity in that market? What would be my share of that opportunity?
Mm-hmm.
And then starting to get into that. So really starting with strategy, right? And then getting into, okay, so now this is a whole new audience that we don't know anything about, chances are, right? So how do we start thinking about that? How do we start identifying, potentially new customers and what they look like and what they want and what they need, and if we really do have an opportunity to infiltrate into a new market?
Yeah, right. What is the term, lift and shift? Or there's lots of different terminologies for this type of
Right.
approach. But really, yeah, it's identifying what, going back to being customer obsessed. Where do we think there's opportunities to find unmet need in a specific category? And if you can identify areas within your category where there's unmet need, a lot of organizations will spin off, even develop a brand that might feel a little bit different to support
Right.
that. You've got a lot like Esurance, I think, was spun off of Allstate or one of the other large insurers to appeal to a younger demographic, where there's sort of a technology overlay on top of some of their products and services.
Right.
But I think that the path is pretty similar. It's you find that unmet need, you know your customer, and you're filling those gaps. And it might be a different experience for that customer than it is
Right.
for maybe your core customer or your legacy customers. And then that goes back to the adaptability. Being customer centric allows you to find these opportunities, and as an organization, be willing to invest in and maybe fail in some of these pursuits. For sure. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when we start talking about identifying customers, I know one of the things that comes up a lot is personas, right? We work with a lot of customers on personas, and I have a really strong opinion on, like, B2B personas are very different than D2C or B2C, right? Personas. Consumers are very different than I work at a business. I'm targeting that business, right? Because when we talk about B2B personas, in my mind, we're really talking about jobs that need to be done. These people have a job to
Right.
do, and it's really about the path of least resistance to do my job. I want to get in, I want to get out, and I want to be done, right? So let's talk a little bit about personas and kind of your perspective on personas, kind of overall, as organizations are thinking about knowing your customers. Part of that is, a lot of the times, it's starting with personas, right?
Right. Well, personas are trying to bring it down into something that you can start to develop some stories around. For instance, you talk about a B2B persona. These aren't casual shoppers that are out looking to sort of spend an afternoon window shopping. There's utility. It's very utility driven. And I think it was at Forrester that talked about there being two tracks for experiences going into the future. One is utility, one is experience. And they're saying brands have to pick. Do you want your experience to be developed, your product or service to be developed around an experience, or is it about more of a utility and a function? And I think you have to know that. I think personas drive that. I think personas allow you to find that outside of maybe demographic data or just sizing a market. When you start to develop personas, you can then start to build use cases against that persona. And certainly in the B2B space, and Karie, you've got a strong point of view. And maybe if you want to go deeper into that point of view, I don't. But I think in the B2B space, it's important to know that your customers do not want to spend time, in investing themselves into an area that's not important for them. Whether it's something that's too much of an experience and less of a utility. They'll reject it, especially if it's something that they have to do in iterative, cycles. If your experience is about a product where you're using it several times a day or several times a week, it better be quick. It better be easy. And that becomes your brand. That becomes the experience versus an experiential brand. You think of like a Disney or something where it really is about an experience, and that's what they invest in. So, I think personas are important, certainly in the B2B space, because it does allow you to start um, to build your personas around the journey, but then those personas then feed into sort of some of those use cases and scenarios where you can truly deliver what your audience actually needs, and what they will actually use on a daily basis.
Well, and I really think about personas in the B2B space a lot around. We talked about the fact that it's a job that needs to be done, right? But so often organizations don't ask their customers, what are we asking you to do that you don't want to do, right?
Yeah.
So many companies have processes that have been in place, workflows that have been in place that were really created for people problems internal to the organization, right? And we never thought,
Sure.
I mean, I've been in manufacturing, I was in manufacturing a long time, and we never thought that any of our internal processes, our internal information was ever going to be just wide open to a customer, right? We always thought we would have somebody in the middle, and we're removing that, right? The whole concept of digital commerce, you know, content, CMS sites, right? Brand sites. It's really starting to really open your organization up to what's
Yeah.
happening inside so people can do things
Yeah.
themselves, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes it's
Yeah.
terrifying. It's terrifying. And I really think about, like, it's so important to have those conversations with your customers, right? To really ask them, what are we making you do? I know empathy mapping is just such a big part of this,
Mhm.
right? Really understanding, like, my interactions with you are like really bad or really good, right? There are really good experiences, and company and your customers will talk about that, right? They love talking about what's good. They really like to talk about what's not so good. And I think that
Yeah.
that's just an important piece, is you want to hear that, right? You want to understand where frustrations are. Another thing that we really like to talk about is talking to your employees. A lot of your customer care team, right? Your support teams, your salespeople. There's a lot of people within your organizations that are having day-to-day conversations with your customers, and they have a lot of insight, right? And so those are things that we really think about as well, is that there's really the opportunity to talk to those customers, talk to those employees, and then start building perspective, right? Like, wow, we didn't realize we were so hard to engage with, or
Yeah.
we didn't realize that we were doing so well here, right? And the other thing I think I really like doing is really going out on some of these forums. I've worked with clients where, they're really looking at understanding voice of customer, talking to their customers. And we went out to some of these forums based on who their target customers are, right? And man, there's a lot of information out, right? And you'll find out really quickly if people love you or hate you. What are your thoughts around that, Keith?
I think that's really great. Your point was really great. I mean, how many people want to ask others what they, tell me all about my worst qualities? It's a hard question to ask, but I think that there's transparency in that. I think your customers will actually probably step up and give you some pretty authentic answers, and I think that's important. Is you do need, with transparency, and you have to have authenticity, and I think that's something brands are hesitant to do. They typically will try to say,
Right.
hey, what do you like? What do you like best about us? And they try to kind of create these vanity metrics around some of their
Right.
customer feedback. You also touched on internal versus external. I think transparency connects those dots between the inside of an organization and the outside of an organization. And as transparency, there's this emerging sort of philosophy and experience now, which is called total experience. You may or may not have heard of it, but it basically, what it means is it's one experience. It's not, we don't delineate between the customer experience and the employee experience. It's
Right.
one journey. It's united. They're both in it together. So a customer might be, writing their own record. An employee might be helping fill a prescription for a patient, but
Right.
it's, the lines are blurred, and it's all real time. It's
Yep.
real time interactions, and I mean, that's kind of where I think where the future of all of this is going, is sort of that true transparency, and You talk about the employee experience, the customer journey, the culture of a company, kind of start pushing all of those into the center. And then if you focus that around the needs of the customer as an organization, then you're really taking this sort of amplifying and sort of taking customer obsession and you're kind of multiplying it by, by 100 or whatever. I mean, it just becomes such a unique perspective to truly, deliver value. So I guess that made me think, as you were talking a little bit about that, sort of where all of this is headed is pretty interesting. It's pretty exciting. But you spend a lot of time talking to folks in commerce, Karie. I mean, when they talk about the customer, what are the themes that they're seeing? I mean, what do you hear?
A lot of the same things you're talking about, right? Like a lot of times their internal organization prevents them, with the way their data is structured, the way their ERP, the way their warehouse systems. There's a lot of times that it's internal data or internal organization history that really prevents from delivering on those really good experiences, right? But what we're really seeing is this is a journey. It's not a destination. You are never done when you are customer obsessed because your customers don't stay where they are, right? Their expectations, the better you get, the more expectations they have, the more things that they start exposing. So it's important to really stay current and always understand that these are things that you're always doing, right? Your personas aren't going to stay stagnant either. Like in B2B, we would talk about like a persona would be a buyer, or a persona might be somebody who's a subject matter expert who researches, right? They are looking for solutions to solve their problems. Their needs are going to change, right? So always staying in touch and updating those personas and updating and understanding, again, where are we blocking you? Where do we make it hard for you? Where do we cause friction? And then transparency on what you can achieve and what you can't achieve, right? The reality is there are quick wins within an organization that you can do, high value quick wins based on what you hear from your customers. And there are high value, big investment things, right? Like,
right.
I need to restructure my data. That is not something you're going to do overnight. So what we really talk a lot about with commerce is any company that wants to buy or wants to sell products or services, your organization is most likely structured around commerce, right? Like that your whole business is around commerce. And those experiences are so spread across all of these different interactions. We talk about different touch points, and you have to start understanding all the ways your customers interact today and keep thinking about that because those touch points are going to change, right? And where are there opportunities to fix them? I like some of the ideas. What I'm working on a project right now where the customers, our client, their customers are saying, we want to help solve the problems. We really believe in this product. We think it's a premier brand. Let us help solve the problems, right? And I think that's really cool. Like they want to do tiger teams. Like let's just jump on an issue, let's unpack it, and then let's have the autonomy as a group to be able to solve that, right? Or at least bring it to the people. And then can we solve it over time? It's not going to be like, wham, it's done. Some will be, but a lot of them are going to be incremental. And what people are really looking for is that when you ask their opinion and you're talking to them or you're working with Proficient, right? We do this all the time. We do voice of customer engagements and we do persona development, buying journeys and empathy mapping. When we're talking to customers, they understand that this isn't easy. And when you talk about transparency, what they want you to tell them is, you know what? We hear you. Here's the things we're going to do now because we can. Here's things that are going to take more work. And we're going to work on those, but those are going to be longer term things. And then they start seeing you taking those small incremental steps to make those improvements, right? We revamp a process. I can't tell you in commerce how many times we've worked with companies who want to customize a technology for an old broken process, right? And my first question is, why would you do that? Like, if the process is broken, Let's address the process. This is a great time to fix that process. And why do you want to customize for a bad process, right?
Right.
I mean,
Well,
maybe.
it's again, going back to the journey, when you talk about those three kind of core components, understanding your customer, understanding their journey, and then finding an opportunity to fix it. To your point, um, road mapping. What are the true value? What are the true elements of value within some broader road mapping as an organization? Where is our maturity? Where do we have our expertise today? Those might be the places where you're going to invest, and some of those other sort of other elements that might require further investment might be a little bit long term. But as these things add up, it's like a snowball. It quickly starts to build, and your customers see it. I've spent time in the medical device space. That's about as tight as I've seen an audience that actually uses a product and a
Right.
company that actually creates a product. I mean, the doctors are actually the physicians are actually co-creating those products with the medical manufacturer community, and that's a super strong bond that they have. Other organizations can do similar things, but you have to open up those pathways and open up those conversations.
And you have to be open to hearing the good, the bad, and the ugly, right?
All
Because
of it.
the purpose here is not to be offended or upset. The purpose here is let's talk about the challenges and let's start unblocking where we can and start making, to your point, those snowball effect changes that all of a sudden people are like, wow, these guys are great, right? They're delivering on the things that they're talking about. I have a great example of that, Keith. Um, Content, right? So this session is about content and commerce, right? Bringing those things together. One really big challenge that we see I don't care what organization you're in, content is so difficult and so challenging. And how important is content, right? We have product content, we have marketing content, we have all types of different content, engineering content.
Yeah.
How do you think about content in really escalating this concept of buying journeys and understanding your customer and customer obsession as it relates to even content?
Yeah. Well, I think the journey is a great place to start. It's understanding where your customer has questions potentially, or where there are gaps in understanding a product or a service in the journey. Those are simple places to start. But it also means that you need to understand, where in the journey those moments are that matter, and you can start to put together content and develop content specific for that audience, or specific for that buying journey. I think what you see a lot of times is the marketing content goes here, the landing page content goes here, and it's long and it's deep, and a lot of times I think if you have a product detail page that has too much content, it can be a negative to your client, to your audience, because it could be perceived as a product that is complex. Or if conversely, if you have a very simple product landing page or a very simple page and it's more there's more white space, for instance. White space can mean that it's maybe more of a premium product, and it's an easier experience. And so I would say know what matters at those moments and truly develop the content through the lens of the consumer. Don't have your product engineer give you the specs and then your description being written by a copywriter who's not engaged with what matters to the customer, because you're going to just create pages and you're going to dump the content in the page. And honestly, the people that are actually doing the design of that page might not even read the content. The designer of that experience should know that content, should know what matters, and bring that content forward. And then you try to do that everywhere, as many places as you can, without trying to boil the ocean. So content is critical, and it's content isn't static. Content should change. Content should refresh. You should try new things. And one of the things I think you can start anywhere. It's like, if you know what are the top 50 questions that your customers have, make a list and then just start to create content around answering those 50 questions. Get that content integrated into your channels, and whether it's a social channel or it's other areas of a site, start to publish. You'll find that you'll probably start to get better conversions. You might even find that you have a halo effect where somebody that's out Googling might have the same question. They're going to find your product or your service through a high-ranking web page that's answering their question. And so content is more than just in the moment. Content has, sort of, broader effects as it relates to your perception of your brand, potentially even outside of, your buying journey as an influence, through search and other ways in which people, you can find and attract customers.
And you have great points, right? So really think about, like, commerce can be in so many different ways, right? It could be, in B2B especially, it can be behind a login. You have to have access, right? You could be a channel partner. You could be an OEM. You could be anybody, right? You could be a buyer. You could be a salesman. It doesn't matter. But the reality is that content is relevant, right? And I see so many technical products, right? And I came out of a very technical industry, is that they have hundreds and hundreds of attributes, as an example, right? And the customer doesn't probably care about those 100 attributes but you think they're important, right? So then where do they fit? And maybe they do fit, but maybe they don't fit in an attribute where you end up with a 100 attribute list, right? That's not consumable, as an example. And then what information helps, right? To your point, when we talk about content and commerce, there's lots of different ways to approach this. We're going to be talking about this in different sessions. There's different ways to approach it, right? Who is your target audience? What are you trying to get? Leverage multiple pages. Sometimes people want to put so much information on a page because they're like, well, less clicks, right? Sometimes more clicks are better than less clicks, right? And guiding people to the information. And that's where your search comes in, right? Like, there are ways to get people to information without making it complicated, but make it consumable based on what they need, what they want, what's important to them. And those personas are so important, right? We talk a lot about personalization, which is such a huge topic in itself, right? I know you and I have talked about this in the past. My first question to everybody is, what is your definition of personalization? And a lot of times it's really segmentation, right? It's not personalization. There's so many different ways that you can think about this, but the idea here is really to start thinking about prioritization. What's high value? What's low value, right? What should we keep doing? What should we stop doing, right? What should we start doing? Because a lot of the information you learn from your customers helps you really think that way. We see so many people in commerce that get so fixated on these really sexy things. Personalization is a great example, right? And they haven't even built a solid foundation, right? They haven't really focused on that foundation of what do we really need to have to start a really good experience and helping our customers engage with us, regardless of what that is. And the way you start prioritizing it is, I know this is used a lot, but crawl, walk, run, right? And again, you're going to crawl, walk, run, and you're going to do that again and again. It's not like you just, shoot the moon, because you're always, as we talked about, going back. So prioritizing high value, what are longer term things? Transparency is a huge topic these days. What information do people really need to know? With all the supply chain issues, Keith, when we talk about that, showing somebody's not, like, showing that something is back ordered and it's going to be a while is better than saying, we'll take your order and we're not going to tell you when you're going to get it, right? Like, there's so much of that going on. I'm sure you could come up with a million other topics, Keith, around that.
Well, and I think you did a nice job of sort of summarizing, but yes, when you are sort of customer obsessed or customer centric, iterative it's kind of behavioral within a company. You have to have workflows that are designed to iterate. You have to have leadership that is willing to invest both in that expertise, but in those processes. And then the prioritization is really important. How do you prioritize those initiatives? How do you build a culture where those prioritizations are actually, truly implemented, by those that within your organization that actually can make those things happen? Because the prioritization is shifting a little bit. I think the way companies are spending dollars today and those priorities are shifting. So from a leadership standpoint, all the way through to implementation, alignment within an organization is extremely important.
I agree. And I think one of the things I think it's important to, Keith, when we're talking about this is if you didn't start like doing things like maybe you have a brand site or maybe you have a commerce site or maybe you have brought those together through content and commerce or you're thinking about that. It's never too late to start backing up and thinking about customer obsession, right? It's not like, well, you missed your opportunity. You've never missed your opportunity. I can't tell you in
No.
commerce especially, and we do a lot of content in commerce, right? Bringing that brand experience together with the ability to buy. And commerce is a lot of things, right? It's not just fulfillment. There's a lot of roles that commerce solutions play. But we talk to people all the time who started with a technology led, right? We picked the best technology, we did the best thing we could, and we're not getting adoption. People aren't using it. We're not seeing site traffic. And the reality is that it doesn't mean you're not successful. It means that your focus was probably very heavy on the technology space, thinking that technology is going to solve your problem. And it's okay to say, we're going to pause that and we're going to really go back and we're going to really think about what customer obsession means. And we're going to think about all the challenges from what we're hearing from our customers, all the challenges that our internal organization has that are going to make this challenging or easy. And that's where that roadmap comes in and that prioritization comes in. And you're never wrong on where you go, right? Ideally, you want to start with strategy first. But the reality is that's not the way companies operate.
Agreed. And you talked, and you kind of said, let's pause, maybe looking backwards. I always think, customer experience, it's always forward, it's always what can we do to improve in building on what you have. So starting small, I've worked to improve customer experience within sort of content layers where we've taken a journey and we've broken it down to a sliver, moments of the customer journey, which are, literally moments of truth in the journey. I've done 30 days, and then I've done more holistic. And so it's always about looking forward, building upon what you have. I always, philosophy is like, invest in what works, try things, what do you find that's working with your customers? Where are you seeing benefits, both for them, and for the business as well? Invest in those areas. And if you're trying things and you're not getting value there, well, even though it might be a priority, you can start to maybe deprioritize something or shift and change. But it's always, I think, really, it's about looking forward and just trying to, again, being customer obsessed. It's making their lives a little bit easier. That's something that's iterative because your customers are always going to change and your business should change with them.
Right. And the one statement you had made in the beginning, right, is that in order to really be successful at any of the things we talked about today is really getting that leadership to understand that this is a way of life, right? And that this is an ongoing thing and that this is really important. And this is where you differentiate your business, right? You're going to sell more products because it's easy to do business with you. You're going to sell more products because people are going to feel like your products are good because your experience is good. Working with you as a company is good. And all of those things are just so critical. So I mean, that leadership piece and really understanding that this is a cultural shift within your organization and that it's going away from being product led, right? You're really talking about being customer led. And that's just really, I think if there's any big takeaways, Keith, that's a big one, that you really are changing the way you think within your organization. And that's going to be reflected in how people interact with you and how satisfied they are with you and your products in the future.
Yep. No, Karie, I love that. And you can innovate and you can differentiate in your experience. And that's what everyone's talking about. You're not there to, you're not going to you can reinvent your product over and over again, but typically that's, there's opportunity again within that customer experience layer. And, I think the conversation we had today is a great place for organizations, at least that might not be fully there, to start thinking about areas where they can invest.
It was a great conversation. Thanks, Keith.
Well, thanks, Karie. Appreciate it.